Breaking news today. As European leaders work to secure Ukraine a seat at the negotiation table, Washington and Moscow are already shaping the next chapter of this conflict behind closed doors. Is this shift toward peace long overdue, or merely more global maneuvering that sidelines American interests? The stakes for our national security and economy have never been higher.
Hello, and welcome to That News Show, where we discuss the latest facts, fakes, and hypocrisy as reported by the legacy media. Let's roll the tape.
BBC News reports that Ukraine's European allies are insisting that Kiev participate in peace talks, concurrent with a meeting between the United States and Russia. This raises a critical question. When did the fate of a sovereign nation become merely a bargaining chip for global power brokers? For years, experts claimed that prolonged American involvement in Ukraine was essential, regardless of the cost to our own nation. Suddenly, Europe demands that Ukraine be included in these discussions. Is this a genuine breakthrough, or merely another act by the globalist class that entangled us in this situation? Let's be clear, the previous Democratic administration under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris deepened America's foreign entanglements, overlooking the risks and labeling dissent as unpatriotic. Their policies led to escalation rather than peace. Now, under President Trump, there's a noticeable shift towards prioritizing negotiations over perpetual warfare, putting American interests first, and challenging the outdated belief that more weapons ensure greater security. Why is it that Western leaders only now acknowledge the necessity and urgency of peace talks under Republican leadership? The pressing question remains, who benefits from prolonging Ukraine's conflict? Ordinary Americans or the global elites who thrive on chaos? The upcoming summit in Alaska could be a critical moment, but only if we resist allowing bureaucrats and foreign lobbyists to control our foreign policy. If Ukraine's future is decided without its involvement, what does that say about the international order we claim to uphold? It's time to reassess our approach to interventionism, reject the consensus of globalist thinking, and demand genuine accountability from our leaders and theirs. Let's see what we can find out.
Leaders. Meanwhile, on Sunday, Russia said an industrial facility was damaged as a result of a Ukrainian drone attack in the southwestern Saratov region, leaving one person dead and a huge fire with thick smoke seen rising from the scene. Now, according to Russian news agencies, 121 Ukrainian drones were destroyed overnight.
And the recent escalation of Ukrainian drone strikes deep inside Russian territory, including an attack on the Saratov region that killed one person and set an industrial facility ablaze, starkly illustrates how far this conflict has strayed from any rational, limited objective. It is believed that the targeted facility was an oil refinery, aligning with Ukraine's strategy to disrupt Russian energy infrastructure. The magnitude of this attack, with over 100 drones intercepted overnight, highlights the intensifying cycle of escalation that disregards the risks of wider regional instability. These developments are particularly striking as they coincide with preparations for an upcoming summit in Alaska, where President Trump will meet President Putin. The timing of these attacks just days before high-level negotiations is a clear signal from Ukraine of its capabilities and resolve, likely aimed at strengthening its bargaining position. Such tit-for-tat strikes complicate diplomatic efforts and increase the risk of unintended consequences. For years, the political establishment, particularly under the previous Democratic administration, advocated for deeper involvement in this conflict, investing billions of taxpayer dollars without a clear American interest. This approach has only led to a more dangerous world and a seemingly endless conflict. The American public was largely kept out of the decision-making process on whether to fund this war or risk confrontation with a nuclear power. Now, under President Trump and a Republican-led White House, there's a significant push for negotiations, recognizing that endless escalation benefits neither the public nor global stability, but only the war industry and globalist agendas. European leaders, despite their calls for unity, are now anxious about being marginalized in peace talks, concerned that any agreement might compromise Ukrainian sovereignty or their security commitments. Meanwhile, Ukraine's refusal to discuss territorial concessions continues, even as the costs and risks of ongoing conflict escalate for civilians on both sides. The lesson is clear. America must adopt a foreign policy that emphasizes restraint and realism. Our focus should be on de-escalation and diplomacy, not perpetual warfare. American leaders should prioritize national interest over those of foreign capitals or international bureaucrats. This latest attack serves as a stark reminder that prolonging this conflict only increases the threat to global stability and our own national security.
Reports.
On a bright Kiev morning, another Ukrainian soldier is laid to rest. As his widow looks on, his mother reflects on the difficult situation the country finds itself in and the sacrifices it is being asked to make for peace.
Right now, we don't have the opportunity to recapture our territories. But to prevent people from dying, we could sign some kind of agreement, but not give up our territories. Not agree that we are giving the captured territories to Russia.
The conflict in Ukraine has reached a critical point, impacting every family and community deeply. The recent loss of a soldier in Kiev underscores the heavy sacrifices made by ordinary Ukrainians, not for territorial gains, but to secure their future and prevent further tragedy. The determination shown by his widow and mother, insisting that peace should not mean surrendering their homeland, exemplifies the tough choices facing Ukraine's leadership and its citizens. European capitals are increasingly advocating for Ukraine's inclusion in peace talks, concerned that negotiations between Washington and Moscow might lead to territorial concessions without Kiev's approval. This week's unified European statement reflects a growing worry that national sovereignty is under threat, particularly with discussions of land swaps and ceasefires looming over the upcoming Alaska summit. The firm stance that borders should not be altered by force challenges any agreement that might legitimize Russian territorial gains. Ukraine's prospects of regaining its occupied territories are limited. Despite employing advanced drones and targeting Russian industrial sites, the military balance has not changed significantly. The recent surge in drone attacks, though technologically advanced, has failed to alter the strategic situation sufficiently to compel Russia to retreat or to recover lost territories. This stalemate continues, escalating tensions and disproportionately affecting civilians. In this context, American policy is under scrutiny. The previous Democratic administration invested heavily in the conflict, driven by ideological goals and a belief in ongoing intervention, which only extended the suffering and heightened the risk of a direct clash with a nuclear-armed nation. The current Republican-led administration favors negotiation and restraint, aligning more closely with the interests of ordinary Americans rather than those of globalist elites or the military-industrial complex. The partisan divide in Washington is stark. Democrats are pushing for maximalist positions, overlooking the limits of Western influence and the perils of endless conflict. Republicans advocate for a more practical strategy focused on de-escalation, diplomacy, and recognizing that America's security does not benefit from continuous involvement in foreign conflicts. This shift reflects a broader political movement towards skepticism of global intervention and prioritizing national interests. As negotiations loom, the challenge will be to ensure that any agreement does not allow aggression or compromise sovereignty. European allies have signaled they will not support a deal that excludes Ukraine or validates territorial conquests. Meanwhile, Ukraine's reluctance to discuss territorial concessions, despite significant losses, poses tough questions about the path to peace and the viability of current strategies. The upcoming days will test whether Western leaders can overcome these divisions and secure a settlement that upholds Ukrainian sovereignty and broader security interests. The stakes are high, not only for Ukraine, but for the future of the international order and America's role globally. The decisions made now will shape the legacy of this conflict and the guiding principles of our foreign policy for years to come.
That same caution was evident in a joint statement from Keir Starmer, along with key European leaders, following yesterday's meeting, which welcomed US talks, but said, "We are convinced that only an approach that combines active diplomacy, support to Ukraine and pressure on the Russian Federation to end their illegal war can succeed. We stand ready to support this work diplomatically, as well as by upholding our substantive military and financial support to Ukraine." But the key question remains: to what extent will the presidents of other countries try to decide the future of this one without input from Kyiv? And if they do, how will Ukraine react?
The joint statement from Keir Starmer and the European coalition highlights a recurring theme. Western leaders persist in their belief that a mix of diplomacy, military aid, and pressure on Russia will yield results in Ukraine. It raises a critical question: do these declarations signify a true commitment to peace, or are they merely perpetuating a cycle of intervention that has characterized the conflict from the start? While the BBC's coverage of this diplomatic initiative is complete, especially in presenting European concerns about being marginalized, it tends to overlook the deep skepticism many Americans now harbor towards continuous foreign involvement and the prudence of channeling military support into an indefinite conflict. BBC News adeptly captures the intricacies of European diplomatic efforts, providing a clear overview of key players and their worries regarding the Alaska summit. The use of expert interviews, including those from Stanford's Hoover Institution, adds valuable insight into the territorial and legal implications, underscoring that forced land swaps seldom lead to enduring peace. The reporting is visually strong, with maps and graphics that effectively depict the shifting front lines and the extent of Russian occupation, helping viewers understand the magnitude of the issue. The coverage could improve by more critically examining the motives of European leaders, particularly their desire to retain control over the process as American priorities evolve towards negotiation and moderation. The BBC's reporting, while generally accurate in fact-checking, tends to take official statements at face value, especially concerning the effectiveness of military aid and the chances of reclaiming occupied territories. Recent polls and expert analyses indicate that most Ukrainians now prefer a negotiated conclusion to the conflict, acknowledging that the military balance has not shifted sufficiently to compel a Russian withdrawal. Integrating these perspectives would offer a more nuanced view of Ukrainian sentiments and the limits of Western influence. In terms of source diversity, the BBC predominantly relies on government spokespeople and established think tanks, which, while authoritative, can restrict the spectrum of viewpoints presented. Including independent analysts or critics of interventionist policies would provide a more complete picture. Although the network's visual storytelling is impactful, it sometimes overemphasizes dramatic military footage, which can detract from the diplomatic realities and the increasing weariness among Western publics regarding military engagements. Looking ahead, the ultimate test for Western leaders will be their willingness to recognize the limitations of military support and to seek a settlement that upholds sovereignty without extending the conflict. The BBC's coverage, complete as it is, should strive to challenge the premises of ongoing intervention and amplify those advocating for moderation and realism. The implications extend beyond Ukraine, touching on the credibility of Western foreign policy and the security of ordinary citizens who bear the brunt of unending conflicts.
But you cannot look at it in isolation, right? Putin will say it's a small price to pay for a ceasefire, right? This is largely emptied and partially destroyed towns in Donetsk Oblast. Why not just cede it to Russia? But these are heavily fortified towns. And if Russia would try to take it by force, it would take years. If Ukraine just cede them, then it would Russia would be in much more favorable position to go further west and to take other parts of Ukraine. So if it's not directly tied to either NATO membership or some other security guarantees and continuation of weapons, military support from key allies like United Kingdom, like Germany and United States, then it would be just a small temporary pause in the war, not what Trump is hoping for.
As European leaders gather for the Alaska summit, the economic stakes are high. Territorial concessions, whether swaps or withdrawals, could have significant financial repercussions for Ukraine and the broader region. These contested areas, once bustling centers of industry and agriculture, are now devastated. Their loss would shrink Ukraine's economic output, reduce the tax base, and hinder reconstruction efforts, leading to fewer jobs, higher prices, and a longer path to stability for ordinary Ukrainian families. From Russia's perspective, annexing these towns might seem a small price for a ceasefire. The long-term costs of rebuilding infrastructure and supporting displaced populations could burden Moscow's finances, already strained by sanctions and limited access to Western markets. While short-term gains may boost domestic support, the economic drawbacks could linger, especially if sanctions on Russian energy and financial transactions remain in place. Western households are also feeling the impact. Since the conflict began, volatile energy prices and food costs have affected American and European consumers, creating market instability. This uncertainty, compounded by the unpredictability of military aid from allies like the United Kingdom, Germany, and the United States, makes investors cautious and businesses reluctant to commit to long-term investments in the region. Families face higher utility bills and grocery costs, diminishing their purchasing power. The financial sector is on high alert, with banks and insurers bracing for potential defaults and asset seizures linked to sanctioned Russian entities. European governments must balance the cost of ongoing military support against domestic needs, with taxpayers bearing the burden of aid packages and defense spending. This situation has led to growing skepticism among Western citizens, many of whom question the value of continuous support for Ukraine against the backdrop of globalist ambitions and a prolonged war economy. If negotiations fail to secure robust security guarantees, such as NATO membership or binding defense commitments, the result might be a temporary ceasefire rather than a lasting peace. Without clear assurances, Ukraine remains vulnerable to further aggression, and Russia may be encouraged to expand westward. This ongoing uncertainty dampens investor confidence and prolongs economic hardship for all involved. Policymakers must prioritize financial stability and household prosperity through diplomatic resolutions that minimize foreign entanglements and reduce the influence of international bureaucrats. As the summit nears, the implications extend beyond geopolitics to the personal finances of families and businesses across the West. The challenge lies in moving past short-term fixes to establish a settlement that ensures genuine economic security, avoiding further cycles of escalation and intervention. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We are witnessing the inevitable collapse of a foreign policy that was built on fantasy and arrogance. For years, the previous Democratic administration deepened our involvement in conflicts that served global rather than American interests. Now, under President Trump, there's a shift toward prioritizing negotiation over perpetual warfare. The pressing questions remain. Why did it take so long, and who really benefits from our prolonged involvement abroad? While Washington's elite chase power overseas, they neglect our domestic issues. The world is evolving, and if we fail to prioritize America's interests, we risk losing everything that truly matters. Be sure to comment below while dropping a like and subscribing. Until next time.